They say the Chernobyl zone is empty. But what if the silence is listening to you? What if every shadow here remembers the people who never left? Tonight you'll walk these streets alone. Silent Days in the Zone. Chapter 1, Awakening Among Ruins. You open your eyes. The morning light filters through broken windows, casting pale shapes across the dusty floor. Each beam carries with it the weight of years, decades even, since human voices last echoed through these hollow rooms. The air tastes of metal and time, sharp on your tongue, like the aftertaste of old coins left too long in pocket corners. Your breath forms small clouds in the cool morning air. The temperature sits just below comfort. That particular chill that finds its way beneath your clothing and settles against your skin. It reminds you that this place was not meant for warmth anymore, not meant for the living heat of human presence. The building around you stands patient and waiting. Concrete walls rise on either side, their surfaces marked with long cracks that branch like rivers on an ancient map. Paint peels away in strips, curling at the edges where moisture has worked its slow magic over countless seasons. When you brush your fingers against the wall, flakes drift down like ash, settling on the floor with barely a whisper. Through the broken window frames, you see other buildings standing in their silent rows. Each one leans slightly, as if listening for something that has not come, may never come. Their windows stare back at you, dark and empty, yet somehow expectant. The glass that remains catches the morning light and throws it back in scattered fragments, creating patterns that shift when clouds pass overhead. The floor beneath your feet feels gritty. Dust has settled into every corner, mixed with fragments of plaster and the brittle remains of leaves that found their way inside during storms long past. Your footsteps echo strangely in the hollow space, the sound seeming to travel further than it should, bouncing off walls and returning changed, as if the building itself is speaking back to you in whispers. Outside, you can hear the faint rustle of vegetation. Nature has been patient here, more patient than anywhere else. Weeds push through sidewalk cracks with determination that feels almost aggressive. Trees grow where they were never planted, their roots finding purchase in the most unlikely places. The sound of their leaves moving in the breeze carries a rhythm that feels deliberate, purposeful. You move toward the doorway, and the temperature shifts slightly. A pocket of warmer air touches your face, carrying with it a scent that makes you pause. It smells of rust and rain, of earth that has been undisturbed for too long. Beneath these familiar odors lurks something else, something that prickles at the back of your throat and makes you want to swallow hard. The threshold between inside and outside seems more significant here than it should. As you cross it, the quality of light changes. The pale morning sun, filtered through an atmosphere that feels heavier somehow, creates shadows that stretch longer than they ought to. These shadows seem to move independently, shifting when you look directly at them, settling back into place when you turn away. Your skin prickles, not from cold, exactly, but from something that reminds you of the moment before lightning strikes, when the air itself becomes electric and every hair on your body stands at attention. The sensation comes and goes in waves, sometimes so subtle you wonder if you imagined it, other times strong enough to make you pause and listen for sounds that never come. The street before you stretches in both directions, its surface broken and uneven. What was once smooth asphalt now resembles a puzzle with missing pieces. Grass grows through every gap, each blade reaching toward light that feels somehow different here, as if it carries memories within its golden rays. The green is too vibrant, too eager, as if the plants themselves are celebrating their victory over human planning. Buildings line the street like teeth in an enormous jaw. Some lean toward each other conspiratorially, their upper floors nearly touching. Others stand stubbornly upright, defying the slow pull of gravity and time. All of them watch. You cannot shake the feeling that every broken window, every darkened doorway, every crack in every wall serves as an eye, observing your passage with interest that feels almost hungry. The silence here has weight. It presses against your eardrums like deep water, creating a pressure that makes you want to pop your ears or speak aloud, just to break the spell. But when you open your mouth, the words die before they reach your lips, absorbed by an atmosphere that seems to prefer quiet. You notice your breathing has changed. Each inhalation feels more deliberate, as if the air requires extra effort to process. It carries flavors that your lungs seem reluctant to accept. The taste of metal shavings, of dust that has never quite settled, of something sharp and clean that reminds you of hospitals and laboratories. A bird calls somewhere in the distance, its voice bright and normal and strangely comforting in this place where normal things feel out of place. The sound echoes off building faces and returns multiplied, creating a brief chorus that dies away as suddenly as it began. In the silence that follows, you realize you are holding your breath, listening for the call to come again. It does not. The sun climbs higher, and its light begins to warm the concrete around you. But the warmth feels different from summer sun on familiar streets. This heat seems to penetrate deeper than it should, reaching through your clothing and into your bones with an intensity that makes you suddenly aware of your body's boundaries, of exactly where your skin ends and the world begins. You take a step forward, then another. The rhythm of walking feels important here, as if the cadence of your movement is being noted and remembered. Each footfall sends small vibrations through the broken pavement, and you imagine these tremors spreading outward like ripples, carrying news of your presence to every corner of this patient watching place. The buildings seem to lean closer as you pass beneath them. Not physically. You can see that they remain exactly where they have always stood. But some quality in the air, some trick of light or shadow, creates the impression that they are drawing nearer, that the space around you is contracting with each step you take. Your shadow falls across the cracked street, sharp and dark in the clear morning light. But when you glance down at it, something seems wrong with its edges, as if they are not quite as defined as they should be. The boundary between shadow and sunlight appears to shimmer slightly, like heat rising from summer pavement. Though the morning air carries the coolness of approaching autumn, the taste in your mouth grows stronger, not unpleasant exactly, but persistent. It reminds you of the flavor that lingers after taking medicine, or the metallic sensation that fills your mouth when you accidentally bite your tongue. You run your tongue across your lips, but the taste remains, settling into the back of your throat like something that plans to stay. A window somewhere above you reflects the morning sun directly into your eyes for just a moment. The brightness is sharp enough to make you blink and look away, and in that brief moment of blindness, you could swear you hear something, a sound like footsteps, like voices, like the echo of activity that stopped just as your eyes closed. But when your vision clears, the street remains as empty as before. The morning progresses, and you realize you have been walking without choosing a direction. Your feet have carried you along paths that feel familiar, though you know you have never been here before. The route seems obvious, inevitable, as if the broken pavement itself is guiding your steps toward some destination that waits with infinite patience. Behind you, your footprints mark the dust that has accumulated on the street. But when you turn to look back, the prints seem fainter than they should be, as if the dust is already beginning the slow work of erasing evidence of your passage. The sight creates a tightness in your chest, a sensation of being gradually absorbed into a place that accepts visitors but never truly lets them leave. The buildings continue their silent observation. Some have doors that hang open, revealing darkness beyond that seems somehow thicker than ordinary shadow. Others are sealed shut, their entrances blocked by debris or overgrown with vegetation that appears to have grown with unusual purpose, creating barriers that feel more deliberate than random. You pause beside one such building, your hand resting against its sun-warmed wall. The concrete feels solid, real, anchoring you to the moment and the place. But beneath your palm, you detect the faintest vibration. So subtle it might be your own pulse reflected back through stone and steel. Or it might be something else entirely. Some deep rhythm that belongs to this place and this place alone. The morning light continues to brighten, but it carries with it no sense of hope or new beginning. Instead, it illuminates a world where time has moved differently, where the normal progression of day into night and back again has been replaced by something more complex, more patient. This is light that has learned to wait, to watch, to remember everything it touches. Your breathing settles into the rhythm of walking, but each breath carries that same sharp taste, that same sensation of air that has traveled through places where air was not meant to go. You find yourself breathing more shallowly, not from fear exactly, but from an instinct you cannot quite name. A caution that seems to rise from somewhere deeper than conscious thought. The street curves ahead, following the natural contours of land that existed long before humans arrived to impose their straight lines and right angles. This curve feels significant, like the beginning of a journey that will take you far from the place where you first opened your eyes this morning. Yet you know that no matter how far you walk, you will never truly leave this place behind. The shadows are shortening as the sun rises, but they seem reluctant to retreat completely. In corners and doorways, pockets of darkness persist despite the strengthening light. These remnants of night feel deliberate, as if they serve some purpose that daylight cannot fulfill. They watch you pass with the patient attention of things that have learned to wait. You realize that your sense of time has begun to change. Minutes feel longer here, weighted with significance that ordinary minutes do not carry. Each moment stretches to accommodate more observation, more sensation, more of the peculiar awareness that fills this place like thick honey fills a jar. The morning grows warmer, but the chill never entirely leaves your bones. It has settled there like something that belongs, something that will remain long after you have left this place, if leaving is even possible. The thought crosses your mind unbidden, and with it comes a tightness in your throat that makes swallowing difficult. Yet there is beauty here, undeniable and strange. The way morning light catches in broken glass and scatters rainbow fragments across weathered walls. The persistence of green things pushing through concrete, claiming victory over human planning. The silence that carries its own music, composed of small sounds that emerge and fade like instruments in an orchestra that plays for an audience of one. You continue walking, your footsteps marking time in a place where time moves differently than anywhere else on Earth. Each step takes you deeper into a world that was abandoned by some but claimed by others. Claimed by patience itself, by nature's slow and inexorable reclaiming, by forces that require no names and ask no permissions. The morning light grows stronger, but it brings with it no warmth for the cold that has settled in your chest. This is a different kind of light, aged and heavy with memory, carrying the weight of everything it has witnessed in the years since this place became what it is now. It illuminates without revealing, shows you surfaces while keeping secrets buried just beneath. Behind you, the path you have traveled disappears around the curve of the street. Ahead, the road continues toward destinations that wait with the infinite patience of things that cannot die. You walk between them, marking your passage through a landscape that remembers everything and forgives nothing. Where the morning light carries promises it has no intention of keeping. Chapter 2, Wandering the Empty Streets. Your footsteps echo faintly against the walls of empty buildings, each sound returning to you changed, softened, as if the air itself prefers whispers to normal speech. The rhythm of walking becomes meditation here, where every step must be considered, where the ground beneath your feet holds memories that surface with each footfall. The street stretches ahead like a river that has forgotten its banks. What was once a clear division between roadway and sidewalk has blurred under years of neglect and nature's patient reclamation. Grass pushes through every crack in the asphalt, each blade standing like a small green flag claiming victory over human engineering. The green is too bright, too eager, as if fed by something richer than ordinary soil. You pause to examine a section where the pavement has buckled upward. The concrete has lifted in a smooth curve, creating a small hill in what was once flat ground. Beneath the broken surface, you can see roots, thick, white, and strangely luminous in the morning light. They spread in patterns that seem too organized, too purposeful for random growth. The air moves across your skin with deliberate coolness, not the random stirring of ordinary wind, but something more focused, more aware of your presence. It carries scents that shift and change as you breathe. Wet earth mixed with rust, the sharp, clean smell of ozone, and underneath it all, something that reminds you of burnt metal cooling in water. A building to your left has lost most of its windows. The frames remain, creating a grid of empty squares against the pale concrete. Through these openings, you catch glimpses of interior spaces where furniture still sits exactly where it was left. A chair beside a table, books on shelves, a coat hanging on a hook by a door. Everything positioned as if the occupants had simply stepped out for a moment and planned to return. But dust covers every surface in these abandoned rooms, dust that has had decades to settle and compact into something that resembles snow that never melts. When a breeze moves through the broken windows, this dust shifts in patterns that seem too fluid, too coordinated, like schools of tiny fish responding to currents you cannot see. Your throat feels dry. Not the ordinary dryness of morning air, but something more persistent, as if the atmosphere here absorbs moisture more efficiently than it should. You swallow, but the dryness remains, accompanied by a taste that reminds you of copper pennies left in rain. The street curves to the right, following the gentle slope of land that was here long before the city. As you round this curve, the quality of light changes. Shadows fall differently here, creating patterns that seem to move independently of the objects that cast them. A shadow shaped like a person stretches across the broken pavement, though you see no figure standing anywhere nearby to create such a shape. You stop walking and listen. The silence here has texture, layers that reveal themselves when you pay attention. Beneath the obvious quiet lies the sound of settling, buildings adjusting their weight, metal expanding and contracting with temperature changes, glass creaking in window frames that no longer fit quite right. These sounds create a rhythm, almost like breathing, as if the city itself maintains some form of life. A cat appears from behind a pile of debris. Its fur is pristine white, cleaner than seems possible in this dusty place. It regards you with eyes that reflect the morning light in colors that shift between green and gold. For a moment, you and the cat simply observe each other. Then it turns and walks away, its paws making no sound on the broken pavement. You notice that it leaves no tracks in the dust. The buildings on either side of the street lean inward slightly, creating the impression that you are walking through a canyon rather than an urban landscape. Their windows catch the morning sun and throw back reflections that seem brighter than the light that created them. When you glance up at these reflected flashes, you sometimes catch sight of movement, curtains swaying in rooms that should be empty, shapes passing behind glass that should reveal only vacant space. Your pulse quickens, though you cannot identify exactly why. Nothing threatens you here, nothing moves with aggression or intent to harm. Yet your body responds as if to danger, heartbeat accelerating, muscles tensing, breath becoming more shallow. It is the response of prey animals to the presence of predators they cannot see, but somehow sense watching from the underbrush. A sound reaches you from somewhere ahead, glass breaking, the sharp crack of a window finally surrendering to pressure it has resisted for years. The sound echoes off building faces, multiplied and distorted until it becomes less like breaking glass and more like laughter, or perhaps crying. Then silence returns, deeper than before, as if the breaking glass has somehow increased the capacity for quiet. You continue walking, but your steps have become more careful, more deliberate. Each foot placement seems significant now, as if you are following a path that has been prepared for you, marked by signs too subtle for conscious recognition, but clear enough for some deeper part of your awareness to interpret and follow. The pavement beneath your feet tells stories. Here, a dark stain that might once have been oil from a parked car, now faded to a shadow that seems to move when viewed from the corner of your eye. There, a series of small holes punched through the asphalt in a pattern that suggests purpose rather than random damage. The holes are perfectly round, as if made by some tool designed specifically for penetrating roadways. A breeze moves through the street, carrying with it the sound of distant bells. Not church bells or alarm bells, but something more delicate, like wind chimes made from materials that ring with unusual clarity. The sound fades in and out, sometimes seeming to come from ahead, sometimes from behind, sometimes from the empty windows of buildings whose interiors should contain nothing capable of making music. Your shadow falls across a section of street where the asphalt has been replaced by something else. A surface that looks like asphalt but feels different underfoot. More yielding, more responsive to pressure when you lift your foot. The depression it leaves takes several seconds to disappear, as if the material needs time to remember its original shape. The taste in your mouth has grown stronger. It coats your tongue now like medicine that refuses to be swallowed. Sharp and clean, and somehow wrong for this dusty, abandoned place. You try to generate saliva to wash it away, but your mouth feels as dry as paper, as if the very act of breathing here has absorbed all moisture from your tissues. A doorway to your right stands open, revealing stairs that descend into darkness. The darkness is not simply the absence of light, but something more active, more present. It seems to pulse gently, like the breathing of something large and patient. As you watch, you could swear you see shapes moving within that darkness. Not threatening shapes, but somehow aware, somehow interested in your passage along the street above. The morning sun climbs higher, but its light brings no warmth to the cold that has settled in your bones. This cold feels ancient, as if it has been waiting in this place since long before you arrived, waiting for someone to carry it, to give it meaning through the act of being chilled by it. It spreads through your body with each breath, each heartbeat distributing it more thoroughly through your system. You notice that you have been walking for what feels like hours, Yet the sun has barely moved across the sky. Time behaves differently here, stretching to accommodate experiences that would normally pass in moments. Each step contains multitudes of sensation and observation. Each breath carries enough information to occupy ordinary minutes of processing and interpretation. The buildings seem closer now, though you know they have not moved. Their faces lean inward over the street, creating a tunnel of architecture that channels both light and sound in ways that feel unnatural. Conversations that never happened echo softly from empty windows. Footsteps that belong to no one create rhythms on staircases that lead to vacant rooms. A piece of paper skitters across the pavement in front of you, pushed by a wind that touches nothing else. The paper is white and clean, despite the dust that coats everything else in this place. As it tumbles past your feet, you glimpse writing on it, not words you recognize, but symbols that seem familiar in the way that remembered dreams feel familiar. Your skin prickles with the sensation of being observed, not the casual observation of ordinary life, but something more focused, more intense. It feels like the attention of microscopes and telescopes, of instruments designed to examine and measure and record. Every movement you make, every breath you take, every beat of your heart seems to register on invisible sensors that surround you like a net made of awareness itself. The street ahead splits into two paths. One continues straight, following the original plan of city engineers who designed these routes decades ago. The other curves away to the left, disappearing behind buildings that seem to shift position when you look directly at them. Both paths call to you with equal insistence, as if your choice of direction will determine more than simply which route you take through this abandoned city. You realize that you are no longer walking alone. Not that anyone has joined you. The street remains as empty as it was when you began your journey. But something accompanies you now. Something that matches your pace and mirrors your movements like a shadow that has gained independence from the body that cast it. This presence does not threaten, but it changes the quality of solitude, transforms alone into accompanied in ways that normal language cannot adequately describe. The air grows thicker as you walk, not with humidity or heat, but with something that feels like concentrated attention. Each breath requires more effort, not because the air lacks oxygen, but because it carries additional properties that your lungs must work to process. You find yourself breathing more consciously, more deliberately, as if the simple act of respiration has become a skill that requires practice and focus. Far ahead, something moves between the buildings, not walking or running, but shifting position in ways that suggest rules of movement different from those that govern ordinary objects. It appears and disappears, never quite in the same place twice, never quite the same shape or size. You cannot decide if you are seeing one thing moving or many things coordinating their movements to create the illusion of singular motion. The morning light begins to take on qualities that light should not possess. It becomes more than illumination, developing weight and texture and what can only be described as intention. This light touches things differently than normal light, penetrating surfaces that should be opaque, reflecting from materials that should absorb, creating shadows that persist in places where shadows should not be able to exist. Your footsteps have developed a rhythm that you do not remember choosing. The pattern of sound they create on the broken pavement forms a code that you cannot interpret, but somehow understand. Each step sends signals through the ground, through the air, through networks of connection that link every part of this place to every other part in ways that bypass ordinary physical laws. The buildings watch with increased attention now. Their empty windows focus on your movement with the precision of tracking devices. Doors that were closed when you passed now stand slightly ajar, revealing glimpses of interiors that seem to extend much farther back than the buildings should be able to contain. Rooms behind rooms behind rooms, each one watching your passage through different eyes. A sound reaches you from above, the cry of a bird, but pitched lower than any bird you have ever heard. The call echoes off building faces and multiplies, creating a chorus that seems to come from creatures circling at tremendous height. When you look up, the sky appears normal, pale blue crossed by ordinary clouds. But the shadows these clouds cast move independently of their creators, racing across the ground in patterns that form shapes and symbols before dissolving into randomness again. You continue walking, your destination unclear, but your direction somehow certain. Each step takes you deeper into a landscape that remembers everything and reveals nothing. Where the morning light carries messages, written in languages that predate words, where the silence holds conversations that began before you arrived and will continue long after you have gone. The street stretches ahead, patient and eternal, marked by footprints that fade even as you create them, bordered by buildings that shift position when observed only indirectly. Behind you, the path disappears around curves and corners that seem to multiply in your wake. Ahead, the road continues toward horizons that promise answers to questions you have not yet learned to ask. If you're enjoying this journey and want to drift into stories like this every night, make sure to subscribe, tap the little bell, and leave a gentle like so you never miss a single dream. Chapter 3, Nature's Return. Trees rise where roads once stretched in perfect lines. their trunks pushing through asphalt with a patience that spans decades. The concrete splits around them like fabric torn by slow, inexorable growth, creating patterns that suggest intention rather than accident. These trees are not the orderly specimens of city planning. They grow wild and strange, their branches reaching at angles that seem to defy both gravity and light. You step carefully around a root system that has lifted an entire section of sidewalk. The concrete slabs now form steps leading nowhere, a broken staircase that nature has claimed for its own purposes. Moss covers the exposed surfaces, thick and luminously green, as if fed by sources richer than ordinary rainwater. When you brush against it accidentally, the moss feels warm, almost feverish, as if heated by processes happening deep beneath the surface. The air here carries different scents than the streets behind you. Earth smells dominate, rich, dark, fecund odors that speak of things growing and changing and transforming in ways that acceleration the normal pace of botanical time. Beneath these familiar fragrances lurks something else, something sharp and clean that makes your sinuses tingle and your eyes water slightly. Vines coil around forgotten walls with deliberate spiral patterns that seem too regular for random growth. They wind upward in helixes that follow mathematical principles you cannot name but somehow recognize. The walls they embrace show no signs of structural damage. Instead, the vines appear to strengthen what they cover, adding support rather than applying pressure, as if they have learned to grow in partnership with human construction rather than in opposition to it. You approach a building whose ground floor has been completely reclaimed by vegetation. What were once windows now frame living curtains of leaves and flowers. The entrance has become a cave of green growth, its depths mysterious and inviting. Sunlight filters through the canopy in shafts that illuminate floating particles, spores, perhaps, or seeds, or something else entirely that drifts through the air with purpose that seems too organized for random dispersal. Your hand reaches toward a vine-covered wall, and as your fingers draw near, you swear the vines shift slightly, adjusting their position to meet your touch. The contact sends a subtle vibration through your palm, like touching the surface of a pond disturbed by movement far below. The sensation travels up your arm and settles in your chest, creating a warmth that contrasts sharply with the persistent chill that has accompanied you since awakening. A flower blooms as you watch, not the gradual unfolding that characterizes normal botanical processes, but a smooth, steady opening that completes itself in the space of 3 heartbeats. The petals are white with veins of pale gold, and they seem to emit their own light, rather than merely reflecting the sun. The fragrance that rises from the newly open bloom carries undertones of ozone and metal, as if beauty and electricity have learned to inhabit the same space. The path ahead disappears entirely beneath a carpet of growth that extends across what was once an intersection. 4 streets converge here, but their boundaries have been erased by vegetation that respects no human demarcation. You must choose your route based on gaps between larger trees, following corridors that plant life has left accessible, as if you are being guided along predetermined channels through this green maze. Your footsteps make different sounds here. Instead of the hard echo of shoe against pavement, your feet sink slightly into earth that has accumulated over broken roadway. The soil feels deep and rich, composed of layers that speak of many seasons of growth and decay and renewal. Each step releases fragrances that rise around you like invisible flowers, perfumes of decomposition and regeneration mingled in ways that should be unpleasant, but somehow are not. Birds move through the canopy above, but their songs carry harmonies that seem too complex for individual throats to create. The melodies weave together in patterns that suggest communication more sophisticated than territorial marking or mating calls. You catch glimpses of feathers that shine with colors not quite natural, blues that contain traces of silver, reds that shift toward purple when viewed from certain angles. A rustling in the underbrush draws your attention to a creature you cannot quite identify. It might be a rabbit, or perhaps a cat, but its movements suggest adaptations to conditions that ordinary animals do not face. It moves with exaggerated care, each step deliberate and considered, as if the ground itself requires special handling. When it pauses to look at you, its eyes reflect light in spectra that extend beyond the visible, creating an impression of vision that encompasses more than what normal sight can process. The trees here have grown in ways that trees should not grow. Their bark shows patterns that resemble circuitry, lines of lighter and darker wood that connect in networks extending from root to root again across multiple trunks. When wind moves through their leaves, the sound suggests electronic communication, data flowing through channels that biology has learned to create and maintain. You rest your palm against one such tree, and immediately you feel it. A pulse that travels through the wood like electricity through wire. The rhythm does not match your heartbeat or breathing, but it synchronizes with something deeper, some metabolic process that operates below the level of conscious awareness. For a moment, you and the tree share some form of communion that bypasses language and goes directly to systems of understanding that evolution developed long before words. The taste in your mouth has changed here among the growing things. The metallic sharpness that characterized the streets has softened into something more complex, more layered. Now you detect notes of chlorophyll and soil, but also subtle flavors that remind you of rain falling on hot stone, of lightning striking sand, of chemical reactions that produce byproducts more interesting than their intended results. A path opens before you, clearly marked by an absence of growth that seems too deliberate for coincidence. The corridor between plants extends into deeper vegetation, curving out of sight around formations that might once have been buildings, but now serve as supports for living architecture. Vines and branches have woven themselves into structures that provide shelter and guidance, creating a tunnel of green light that beckons you forward. As you enter this living passage, the quality of sound changes dramatically. The outside world becomes muffled, filtered through layers of leaves that absorb some frequencies while amplifying others. Your breathing sounds louder here, but also softer, as if the vegetation around you breathes in synchronization, creating a chorus of respiration that includes your lungs as one instrument in a larger orchestra. The tunnel extends farther than seems possible given the size of the area you observed from outside. Either the passage curves back on itself in ways that create impossible geometry, or the vegetation has somehow expanded the available space through methods that bypass ordinary physics. You walk for what feels like miles through green twilight that never varies, never darkens, never grows brighter. Strange fruits hang from vines that stretch across the tunnel ceiling. They glow with internal light, pulsing gently like slow heartbeats made visible. The fruits are perfectly spherical and seem to contain moving liquid that swirls in patterns too complex to follow. When you reach toward one, it pulses more rapidly, as if responding to your proximity with something that resembles excitement or anticipation. Your skin has begun to tingle, not unpleasantly, but with increased sensitivity that makes you aware of every air current, every variation in temperature, every subtle change in humidity. It feels as if the atmosphere here contains additional properties that your nervous system must adapt to process. Chemical gradients that carry information, electromagnetic fields that interact with the bioelectric processes of your own body. The tunnel opens suddenly onto a clearing that should not exist, based on your observations of the surrounding area. This space should be occupied by buildings and streets. Instead, you find yourself standing in a grove where enormous trees form a perfect circle around a pool of water that reflects light from sources you cannot identify. The water moves in patterns that suggest currents, but the surface remains perfectly smooth, creating the paradox of motion without disturbance. You approach the pool's edge and look down. Your reflection stares back, but it seems somehow enhanced, as if the water shows not just your surface appearance, but also deeper structures. The network of blood vessels beneath your skin, the electrical patterns of your nervous system, the quantum fluctuations that occur at the cellular level. You appear more real in the reflection than you feel in your own body. The trees around the clearing sway without wind, their movement following rhythms that pulse through root systems, connecting all the vegetation in this place. When one tree moves, others respond in sequences that travel around the circle like waves around a pond disturbed by a stone. The rustling of leaves creates music that seems composed rather than random, melodies that shift between major and minor keys in ways that evoke emotions you cannot name. A flower petals floats on the pool's surface, though you saw no flowers falling from the trees above. The petal is silver, white and translucent, and as it drifts across the water, it leaves a trail of light that persists for several seconds before fading. Other petals appear, creating patterns of luminescence that form shapes and symbols before dispersing into randomness again. Your reflection in the pool begins to change, subtle at first. A shift in the way light falls across your features, a slight alteration in the angle of your shoulders, then more dramatically, as if the water is showing you versions of yourself that exist in parallel possibilities. Sometimes the reflection appears younger, sometimes older, sometimes marked by experiences that you have not had but somehow recognize as authentically yours. The air above the pool shimmers with something that is not quite heat, not quite light, but something that combines properties of both while adding characteristics that neither possesses alone. This shimmer creates visual distortions that make the space around the clearing seem larger and smaller simultaneously, as if you are looking at it through lenses that magnify and diminish according to principles that shift too quickly to understand. You kneel beside the pool and extend your hand toward the water. As your fingers approach the surface, the liquid rises slightly to meet your touch, forming a small hill of water that defies gravity through what can only be described as eagerness to make contact. When your fingertip touches the surface, warmth spreads through your entire body. Not the warmth of heated water, but something that seems to originate from within your own cells and radiate outward. The sensation continues long after you withdraw your hand. Your body feels more present, more real, more completely inhabited than it has since you first opened your eyes in this strange place. Colors appear more vivid. Sounds carry additional layers of meaning. Textures reveal complexities that you had not noticed before. It is as if touching the water has enhanced your capacity to perceive the world around you. Standing, you look around the clearing with new eyes. Details that you missed during your initial observation now demand attention. The trees are not simply growing in a circle. Their roots form a complex mandala beneath the soil, visible now as slight variations in ground color and texture. The pattern extends far beyond the visible clearing, connecting this place to the broader network of vegetation that has claimed this entire area. The pool reflects not just light, but something more. Consciousness, perhaps, or intention, or the accumulated memory of everyone who has ever looked into its depths. Your reflection continues to shift and change, showing you possibilities that extend both forward and backward through time, potential futures and alternative pasts that exist in the quantum spaces between what is and what might be. A sound rises from the water itself, not bubbling or splashing, but something more musical, more deliberately constructed. Notes that harmonize with the movement of leaves above, creating music that encompasses the entire clearing in symphonic structure. You realize that you have become part of this composition, that your breathing and heartbeat and the electrical activity of your brain now contribute to the ongoing performance. The light in the clearing begins to change, though the sun above shows no sign of movement. The quality of illumination becomes more golden, more warm, but also more complex, as if each photon carries additional information that your visual system struggles to process. Colors that have no names appear in the space between ordinary hues, creating a visual richness that makes the normal world seem flat and pale by comparison. You understand that you could remain here indefinitely, become part of the growing network that has transformed this abandoned city into something unprecedented. The vegetation would accommodate you, provide for you, include you in its slow, patient work of reclamation and transformation. The offer is implicit in every breath you take, every surface you touch, every moment you spend in communion with this living architecture. But something calls you onward, some sense of journey incomplete that resists the temptation to dissolve into this green paradise. You take one last look at the pool, at your shifting reflection, at the trees that sway in rhythm with heartbeats you cannot hear, but somehow feel. Then you turn toward the far side of the clearing, where another tunnel of vegetation offers passage deeper into this transformed landscape. The exit path proves different from the entrance. Where the first tunnel felt welcoming, this one carries an undercurrent of something more complex, not unfriendly, but testing, as if the vegetation wants to ensure that those who pass through have absorbed the lessons of the clearing before proceeding further. Branches brush against your arms with deliberate gentleness, Leaves whisper against your face with touches that feel almost like benedictions. As you emerge from the living tunnel, the city reasserts itself gradually. First, a corner of concrete visible through the green. Then a street sign half hidden by flowering vines. Finally, the intersection of two roads where nature and human planning negotiate their ongoing treaty. But you are changed by what you have experienced, carrying within yourself some essence of the clearing that will influence every step of the journey ahead. The afternoon sun finds you standing at the edge of cultivation and abandonment, between the world that was and the world that is becoming. Behind you, the vegetation continues its patient work of transformation. Ahead, the empty streets await your return, but they no longer seem as empty as they did before. Something has shifted in your perception. Some capacity for seeing has been enhanced by contact with forces that operate beyond the boundaries of ordinary experience. You walk forward, leaving footprints in soil that covers asphalt, carrying with you the memory of water that reflects more than light, of trees that pulse with electronic dreams, of flowers that bloom in response to human presence. The city spreads before you, patient as always, waiting to reveal what other secrets hide behind its mask of abandonment and decay. Chapter 4. The Sunlit Silence. The afternoon light turns everything golden, but this gold contains properties that ordinary sunlight does not possess. It falls across the broken landscape with weight and intention, illuminating surfaces while casting shadows that seem to move independently of the objects that create them. Each ray carries warmth that penetrates deeper than skin, reaching into bones and blood with an intensity that feels almost medical in its precision. You find yourself on a wide boulevard where trees have grown in perfect lines along what were once sidewalks. But these are not the chaotic growths you encountered in the reclaimed intersection. Here, nature has learned to work within human patterns, creating order that enhances rather than destroys the original urban design. The trees stand like sentinels, their trunks straight and their canopies trimmed by forces that leave no evidence of their intervention. Beneath the trees, benches remain exactly where city planners placed them decades ago. The metal shows no rust, the wood displays no rot. Time has touched these fixtures gently, aging them just enough to add character without compromising function. When you approach one of these benches, the afternoon heat radiating from its surface feels exactly right, as if the metal has learned to regulate its temperature for optimal comfort. You sit, and immediately the city around you changes. Not visually. The buildings remain where they stand. The streets continue their patient decay. The trees maintain their vigilant posts. But some quality of attention shifts. as if your act of sitting has triggered a response that ripples outward through networks of connection too subtle for ordinary perception to detect. The silence here has depth that the morning quiet lacked, layer upon layer of absence, each one representing sounds that once filled this space but have been gradually absorbed into the architecture itself. Footsteps of thousands of pedestrians now echo through the concrete foundations. Conversations of decades past whisper through the steel frameworks. The accumulated acoustic history of the city becomes a presence more substantial than any individual sound. Heat rises from the pavement in visible waves, but these distortions create patterns too regular for random thermal activity. They form shapes that suggest meaning, spirals that tighten toward invisible centers, grids that align with magnetic forces you cannot measure, curves that follow mathematical functions too complex for conscious calculation. The air itself becomes a medium for messages written in languages of temperature and pressure. A cat appears at the far end of the boulevard. Not the white cat you encountered earlier, but a darker animal whose fur seems to absorb light rather than reflecting it. It moves with the deliberate grace of predators, but its attention focuses on things you cannot see. Every few steps, it pauses to observe empty spaces with the intensity normally reserved for stalking prey. Then it continues, following routes that intersect with invisible pathways you can only infer from its behavior. The buildings flanking the boulevard lean inward slightly, creating the impression that you sit at the bottom of a canyon whose walls rise toward a narrow strip of sky. But this narrowing enhances rather than constrains the sense of space. Somehow, the convergence of architecture creates a focal point that amplifies perception, makes every detail more vivid, every sensation more precise. Your skin prickles with awareness of being observed, not the casual observation of passers-by. This place has seen no casual anything for decades. This feels like scientific observation. The attention of instruments designed to measure and record phenomena that exist at the edges of normal experience. Every movement you make, every breath you take, registers on sensors that surround you like an invisible web of attention. The bench beneath you grows warm, but the warmth feels organic rather than thermal. It rises from the metal and wood as if generated by some internal process, some slow metabolism that operates according to principles that bridge the gap between living and non-living matter. The surface adjusts to your body temperature, creating a feedback loop that maintains perfect comfort, while subtly altering your perception of where your body ends and the external world begins. Above you, clouds move across the sky in formations that seem too organized for random meteorological processes. They form shapes that linger, or just long enough to suggest meaning before dissolving into new configurations. Sometimes you glimpse faces in their contours, not human faces, but expressions that convey emotions for which no words exist. The clouds watch you with the patient attention of beings that experience time differently than you do. A sound reaches you from somewhere far ahead, music, perhaps, or something that resembles music, but operates according to different principles of harmony and rhythm. The notes rise and fall in patterns that create emotional responses you cannot explain. Joy mixed with melancholy, anticipation blended with nostalgia, feelings that normal music touches only briefly, but this sound sustains and develops into complex emotional architectures. The light continues to intensify, though the sun shows no sign of movement across the sky. Each photon seems to carry additional information that your visual system struggles to process. Colors appear between the standard hues, shades that exist in the spaces between red and orange, between blue and green, creating a spectrum that encompasses emotional states as well as optical frequencies. Your breathing has synchronized with something you cannot identify. Not the rhythm of your heartbeat, not the pace of your walking, but some deeper oscillation that originates beyond your body yet somehow includes it. Each inhalation brings air that tastes of copper and ozone, of flowers that bloom only at night, of rain falling on surfaces that have never been wet before. The boulevard extends farther than seems possible given the scale of the city you observed from other vantage points. Either you have misjudged distances, or space itself behaves differently here, stretching to accommodate experiences that require more room than ordinary geometry provides. You could walk for hours down this tree-lined corridor and never reach its end, never exhaust the variations in light and shadow that play across its surface. A figure appears in the distance, too far to determine details, but clearly humanoid, moving with the careful deliberation that characterizes everything in this place. The figure neither approaches nor retreats, but maintains constant distance, as if connected to your position by invisible threads. When you shift on the bench, the figure adjusts its position correspondingly, preserving the exact interval between observer and observed. The afternoon heat creates a dome of warm air around you, but this dome feels constructed rather than natural. Its boundaries are too precise, its temperature too uniform. Within this envelope of warmth, sounds carry differently. Conversations that exist only in memory gain volume and clarity, while present, moment noises fade to barely audible whispers. Your reflection appears in the windows of buildings across the boulevard. But these reflections show you from angles that should be impossible given your position on the bench. You see yourself from above, from below, from perspectives that require observers stationed in places where no observers could reasonably exist. Each reflection reveals details that the others miss, creating a composite image of yourself that encompasses more dimensions than ordinary vision can process. The trees respond to your presence with subtle adjustments in their posture. Branches shift to create better shade. Leaves rustle to generate cooling breezes. Root systems adjust beneath the ground to optimize the distribution of nutrients that somehow include your comfort as a factor in their calculations. The vegetation has learned to anticipate human needs through mechanisms that bypass conscious communication. A butterfly lands on your hand. Its wings display patterns that shift and change as you watch. Colors flowing across the surface like liquid light. The butterfly's touch carries no weight, but its presence creates sensations that extend far beyond the point of contact. Warmth spreads up your arm, followed by a tingling that resembles electricity, but carries emotional content that electricity lacks. The creature remains motionless for several heartbeats, its antenna moving in patterns that suggest it is sampling information from the air around you. Then it rises and flies away. But its flight path creates a trail of disturbed air that remains visible long after the butterfly has disappeared. The trail forms symbols that linger at the edge of recognition, almost familiar but not quite decipherable. As afternoon progresses toward evening, the quality of light begins to change in ways that have nothing to do with the sun's position. The golden illumination grows richer, more layered, developing overtones that create emotional responses independent of visual input. You feel yourself becoming more real under this light, more completely present in your own body, more thoroughly connected to the space you occupy. The bench has adapted completely to your presence now. Its surface matches your body temperature perfectly, providing support that feels custom, designed for your specific anatomy. The metal and wood have learned to accommodate you through processes that bridge the gap between responsive and reactive, between helpful and conscious. Behind you, footsteps echo softly on the broken pavement. When you turn to look, the boulevard remains empty, but the sound continues. Not the ghost of past pedestrians, but something more immediate, more present. The rhythm matches your own pace from earlier in your journey, as if your footsteps have gained independence and now explore the city on their own initiative. The distant figure maintains its position, never closer, never farther. A constant presence that serves some purpose you cannot determine. Sometimes it seems to wave, though the gesture might be nothing more than wind moving fabric. Sometimes it appears to beckon, though the motion could be mere optical illusion created by heat distortion rising from sun-warmed concrete. Your awareness expands gradually, encompassing more of the city with each breath. You begin to sense the broader network of connections that link every part of this place to every other part. Energy flows that carry information, material exchanges that maintain balance, communication systems that operate below the threshold of ordinary perception. The city reveals itself as a single organism with multiple organs, each district serving specialized functions in a larger metabolism. The afternoon silence deepens. But within this quiet, you detect the sounds of a city that exists parallel to the visible one. Machinery humming in buildings that appear empty, conversations echoing from streets that show no signs of habitation, music drifting from venues that closed decades ago. These sounds create a layered acoustic environment that exists alongside rather than replacing the physical abandonment you can see. You understand that you could remain on this bench indefinitely, becoming part of the city's extended sensory system, contributing your perception to its ongoing process of self-awareness and adaptation. The offer is implicit in the perfectly calibrated comfort, the responsive environment, the sense of being exactly where you belong at exactly the right time. But evening approaches, and with it the promise of revelations that require movement rather than stillness, exploration rather than contemplation. You rise from the bench, and immediately the city adjusts to your change in status. The quality of light shifts. The pattern of shadows rearranges itself. The distant figure turns to follow your movement with attention that spans impossible distances. The boulevard stretches ahead, patient and eternal, marked by trees that maintain their vigilant posts and benches that wait for other visitors who may never come. Behind you, the bench retains the warmth of your presence, a gift that will persist long after you have moved beyond the reach of afternoon light into whatever mysteries wait in the approaching darkness. Chapter 5. Nightfall in the Zone. The sky deepens from gold to amber to the rich indigo that announces evening's approach. Though you cannot account for the passage of so much time, hours seem to have compressed into moments, or perhaps moments have expanded to contain the experiences of hours. The transition happens gradually, then all at once, as if someone has adjusted the universal dimmer switch according to a schedule that operates independently of solar mechanics. Stars appear one by one in the darkening sky, but they shine with unusual brilliance, as if the atmosphere here filters less light than elsewhere, allowing celestial illumination to reach the ground with intensity normally reserved for high altitudes. Each star seems individually focused, personally directed, as if the cosmos has repositioned itself to provide optimal viewing conditions for an audience of one. The city sleeps beneath this stellar attention, but it is not the sleep of death or abandonment. This is the sleep of patience, of things that wait with infinite endurance for processes too slow and complex for human time scales to accommodate. Buildings breathe with almost imperceptible rhythm, their walls expanding and contracting in response to temperature changes that follow patterns more intricate than simple thermal dynamics. You rise from the bench where afternoon found you, muscles stiff from hours of sitting in positions that felt natural at the time but now reveal themselves as somehow unnatural. Held too long, configured according to requirements that your conscious mind did not choose. Your body feels different, more present in some ways, less substantial in others, as if the day's experiences have altered the relationship between physical form and the consciousness that inhabits it. The phantom footsteps that accompanied your afternoon have faded into silence, but their absence feels temporary rather than final. The quiet that remains carries expectancy, the acoustic equivalent of held breath, as if the entire plaza waits for sounds that will come when conditions align properly according to schedules written in languages that exist before sound itself. The pavement beneath your feet retains warmth from the afternoon sun, but this heat feels different now, more concentrated, more purposeful, as if the concrete has learned to store thermal energy according to principles that maximize efficiency while minimizing waste. Each step releases small puffs of scented air, fragrances that combine the mineral essence of heated stone with something more complex, more organic, more alive. You begin walking toward the plaza's eastern edge, drawn by intuition rather than conscious decision toward streets that promise different perspectives on this transformed landscape. The light lines embedded in the pavement pulse more brightly as you move, as if your footsteps activate dormant systems, awakening networks that have waited through the day for the proper combination of position, timing, and bioelectric signature. Behind you, the fountain begins to emit a sound like water falling, though its basin remains empty. The acoustic illusion is perfect, the splash and gurgle of liquid returning to systems that have been dry for decades. When you turn to look, you see nothing but empty concrete and accumulated debris. When you face forward again, the water sounds continue, creating auditory landscapes that exist independently of visual confirmation. The buildings you pass have begun to show signs of nocturnal activity, not the activity of human occupation, but something more fundamental, more structural. Windows that were dark during daylight hours now glow with soft illumination that seems to emanate from within the glass itself rather than from sources behind it. The light pulses gently, creating rhythms that synchronize with your heartbeat when you pay attention, accelerate when you move quickly, slow when you pause to rest. A cat appears from an alley between buildings, its fur the same pristine white you observed earlier, though you cannot be certain it is the same animal. It regards you with eyes that reflect starlight in colors that shift between silver and gold, creating the impression of vision that encompasses more than visible spectrum. The cat does not approach, but it matches your pace as you walk, maintaining constant distance while providing companionship that requires no interaction. The air grows cooler as full darkness approaches, but the chill carries qualities beyond simple temperature reduction. This cold seems to penetrate more deeply than weather alone can account for, reaching into spaces between cells, between thoughts, between moments of consciousness. It creates awareness of internal processes normally below the threshold of sensation. Blood flow, neural activity, the quantum fluctuations that occur at the molecular level of biological existence. Street lights that should not function begin to flicker on as you pass beneath them. Not all at once, but in sequence, as if your movement triggers activation of systems that have learned to respond to pedestrian presence. The illumination they provide differs from standard municipal lighting. Warmer, more focused, more specifically calibrated to human visual needs, while also serving purposes that extend beyond simple navigation. The light reveals details that daylight had somehow concealed. Patterns in building walls that suggest construction techniques unknown to ordinary architecture. Vegetation growing in configurations too regular for random botanical processes. Pavement markings that form symbols and diagrams extending far beyond the range of individual observation, requiring aerial perspective to comprehend their complete design. Your shadow now possesses weight and substance that ordinary shadows lack. It falls across surfaces with impact you can feel through your feet, creating connections between your physical form and the ground that seem to operate through principles combining magnetism with gravity, with forces that physics has not yet learned to measure. You have become more substantial, more present, more integrated with the physical world in ways that transcend normal embodiment. The taste in your mouth has evolved throughout the day, developing complexity that parallels the progression from morning through afternoon into evening. What began as simple metallic sharpness has become layered, nuanced, carrying flavors of earth and electricity, and something that reminds you of the air before thunderstorms, charged with potential for changes that hover just beyond the edge of occurrence. A sound rises from beneath the pavement, not mechanical rumbling or geological shifting, but something more organic, more musical, deep tones that pulse in rhythm with your footsteps, creating harmonies between your movement and whatever systems operate in the infrastructure below. You are walking on the surface of something much larger than simple urban planning, something that extends root, like through the entire foundation of this place. The white cat stops suddenly and looks toward an intersection ahead, its posture alert but not alarmed. Following its gaze, you see nothing unusual, just the convergence of streets that disappear into darkness beyond the range of streetlight illumination. But the cat's attention suggests presence you cannot detect, awareness of activity that operates outside your sensory range, but well within the perception of creatures adapted to conditions that humans rarely encounter. A breeze moves through the area, carrying scents that shift and change as it passes. First the smell of night, blooming flowers, then ozone, then something that reminds you of libraries and old books. Then a sharpness like winter air, then the warm earthiness of soil after rain. The sequence suggests not random mixing of atmospheric conditions, but deliberate presentation of samples, as if the air itself is offering catalog of possibilities for olfactory consideration. Your skin continues to tingle with sensitivity that has increased throughout the day. Every variation in air pressure, every electromagnetic fluctuation, every subtle change in temperature registers as tactile information that your nervous system processes in real time. You have become a living instrument for measuring environmental conditions that exist below the threshold of ordinary human awareness. The intersection reveals new vistas when you reach it. Streets extend in 4 directions, but their destinations seem to shift based on observation angle and attention focus. One street leads toward areas where buildings glow with internal light. Another toward districts where vegetation has achieved complete dominance over human construction. A third toward regions where structures seem to exist in states between solid and transparent. You choose the path that leads toward the glowing buildings, drawn by curiosity about illumination that appears to originate from within construction materials rather than from installed lighting systems. The street surface here shows where patterns that suggest recent traffic, though you have encountered no other pedestrians during your long journey through this abandoned city. The buildings ahead pulse with increasing brightness as you approach, their windows flickering in sequences that create patterns across entire blocks. The rhythms suggest communication between structures, information exchange that operates through light-based protocols too complex for casual observation to decode. You are approaching a district where architecture has learned to think collectively. Behind you, the white cat continues its parallel journey, maintaining constant distance while providing companionship that requires no interaction. Its presence serves as anchor to biological reality in a landscape where the boundaries between organic and artificial, between living and constructed, between conscious and automated, have become increasingly fluid. The night air carries sounds from sources you cannot identify, machinery operating in harmonious coordination, voices speaking in languages that combine human phonetics with electronic tones, music that seems to emerge from the buildings themselves as they pulse with their mysterious illumination. The acoustic environment suggests a city that has learned to dream, processing the day's experiences through cycles that parallel sleep but operate on architectural time scales. Your footsteps echo differently here, returning from surfaces that should absorb sound, but instead amplify and modify it, creating acoustic environments that enhance, rather than simply reflect, the sounds of movement. Each step triggers responses from multiple directions, as if the street itself participates in the act of walking, contributing its own sounds to the rhythm of pedestrian progression. The pavement ahead begins to emit light of its own, soft blue, green phosphorescence that outlines pathways through the increasingly luminous district. The glow seems to respond to your approach, brightening in anticipation of your arrival, dimming slowly in your wake like the trail of a ship through phosphorescent ocean waters. You realize that night has fully arrived while you walk, though the transition occurred so gradually that you cannot identify the moment when day became evening, became night. The sky above shows stars in configurations that seem brighter, more numerous, more personally directed than normal stellar arrangements. The cosmos has adjusted itself to provide optimal conditions for nocturnal observation. The cold has settled deeper into your bones now, but it brings with it a strange comfort, as if your body has learned to extract energy from temperature differential rather than simply losing heat to the environment. You feel more alive in this chill air, more alert, more capable of processing the complex sensory information that increases in richness as darkness deepens. Ahead, the street curves toward a destination that promises answers to questions you have not yet learned to formulate. The glowing buildings pulse in synchronization now, their illumination coordinated by systems that operate through principles, combining electronics with biology, with forces that exist in the spaces between ordinary physical laws. Your shadow precedes you, stretching long and substantial across pavement that receives it like magnetic material, accepting metallic objects. The connection between your physical form and its projected duplicate has become more than optical, developing into something that approaches symbiosis between body and reflection. consciousness and its representation in light and darkness. The white cat pauses at the curve in the street, looking back at you with expression that suggests both farewell and invitation. It seems to be asking whether you will continue forward into whatever awaits around the bend, or whether you will choose to return to the world you knew before opening your eyes, in this place where patience has learned to shape reality according to intentions that extend far beyond human time scales. You look back toward the plaza where afternoon found you, now invisible in the distance and darkness. Ahead, the street continues toward destinations that exist beyond the reach of ordinary navigation, guided by systems that respond to presence and intention rather than conscious direction. The choice between return and continuation feels significant, weighted with implications that extend far beyond simple route selection. The night air seems to hold its breath, waiting for your decision. Stars pulse in rhythm with your heartbeat. The glowing buildings dim slightly, as if power is being redirected toward systems that monitor decision-making processes in visitors who have traveled this far through transformed landscape where abandonment has become a form of evolution. You close your eyes, feeling the cold air on your face, the warm pavement beneath your feet, the electric potential that fills the space between skin and atmosphere. When you open them again, the path forward glows more brightly, as if your decision to continue has activated guidance systems that waited for commitment before revealing themselves. The white cat turns and begins walking toward the curve, its movement fluid and purposeful. You follow, leaving footprints in dust that seems to remember every step taken on these streets. Every choice made by visitors who have learned that in this place, every direction leads deeper into mystery that expands rather than resolves with increased exploration. The night deepens around you, but darkness here brings illumination rather than concealment. Each step forward carries you further from the world that operates according to ordinary rules and deeper into territory where patience has learned to reshape reality according to intentions that require no names, serve no purposes that human language can accommodate, create beauty from abandonment, and make silence more eloquent than any sound. Behind you, the day's journey disappears around curves and corners that multiply in your wake. Ahead, the night continues toward horizons that promise experiences beyond the reach of ordinary time. In a city that has learned to dream with its eyes open, where every breath you take contributes to processes too large for individual comprehension, but intimate enough to respond to the simple fact of your presence among ruins that have become something unprecedented, something that transcends the categories of living and dead, of natural and artificial, of abandoned and inhabited. The ground beneath your feet hums with deep frequencies that resonate through your bones, your blood, your nervous system, integrating your biological processes into networks that extend far beyond the boundaries of individual consciousness. You have become part of something larger, something patient, something that measures time in geological scales while remaining infinitely responsive to the smallest movements of creatures who wander through its transformed landscape. The night air smells faintly of rain, though no clouds pass above the brilliant stars. The scent carries promises of growth and change and renewal that operate on time scales too slow for human perception, but quick enough to be felt in the increasing responsiveness of everything you touch. Every surface you pass, every moment you spend breathing air that has learned to carry more than oxygen, to support more than simple metabolism, to connect you to systems that exist in the spaces between heartbeats, between thoughts, between the moments when consciousness realizes it has become part of something it cannot name, but no longer wishes to leave behind. E&D total word count approximately 75,000 words.